Calgary for meetings and interviews, and I have an opportunity here to sit down with Ian Fraser once again, of CEO of Fathom Nickel, just to get us caught up on kind of the corporate doings and their exploration program they've done this year so far. And so thanks for joining me, Ian, and nice to see you again.
Oh, good to see you here in Calgary, man.
Yeah, no, I know. I got my wife and kids are out touring the river, and they're having a good time. Why don't you just lead us off? Just walk us through briefly, and then I'll have some follow-up questions for you, but just walk us through your summer exploration campaign, right? You've soil samples and rock samples and service geochem, and you've managed to expand the mineralized footprint along strike, sort of to the southwest and northeast. And I guess maybe I'll leave it off there and just ask you to maybe just run us through what you've done, the success you've had, and maybe the significance or how this is helping to evolve your understanding of Gochager.
Yeah, well, it was a challenging summer with the wildfires, as we've mentioned in the various press releases. But so we got chased out of there by the wildfire for the first segment of the exploration, but that's been done, and our soils are all in hand now. So we do have all the results, and we're going through that. And then I went up with Vanessa to go to the site myself in September, to get an idea of the extent of the wildfire. And it literally cleared out the lineament that we're focusing on. And it was actually kind of interesting because, we'd be standing on higher topography, looking down into lower topography, and then higher topography on the other side. And of course, Gochager is in a swamp in lowland, and then you just sort of continue this lineament across a couple of small lakes and off to the northeast. And what's really interesting is we've been able to find mineralized gabbro. This is our key rock on the west side of one of these small lakes in this lineament that I'm talking about. Vanessa found ultramafic rock on the other side of this lake. And then we had another campaign post our visit, Vanessa and I, because, of all this new exposed outcrop, we went out there and blitzed it again with prospecting. And so we've been able to, around this one particular lake, find more gabbro, mafic, ultramafic rock. So, what's below these lakes? And just, even north of where our camp is, there's more mafic, ultramafic rock. So to your point, we really have expanded this footprint, and it's something that we've been wanting to do is demonstrate scale. Gochager, I think, is a hint of potentially what's in this developing trend, albeit, can I call it a district? Ideally we'd like to call it some kind of a district, but yeah, so we'll have some news. We've been able to, now that we have the results, we're going through the results. So there'll be, things coming out over the next several weeks that hopefully demonstrate the progress.
Yeah, no, good. And I'll make sure to get you back on. We can try to go through that in greater detail here versus just sort of some generalities now. But I suppose maybe and that was a question we were chatting off camera, right, about this necessity or the need or the drive to, as you say, sort of demonstrate scale and the repeatability of what is up there and the potential for something much larger than the original historic deposit. And I guess maybe the question I have for you, have you seen sort of a shift in the center of gravity now of Gochager, where, previously historical exploration and your own exploration, very much centered in and around the historic deposit? Now you really have stretched it, I guess I'll let you tell me the number of kilometers, kind of a long strike for that, but are you seeing maybe potentially kind of maybe not necessarily just the shifting of the center of gravity to, you think maybe there might be higher sources or higher grade here or there, but are you seeing sort of maybe even competing satellite kind of areas that are evolving now, that are developing as potential drill targets?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes. Yeah. And, I think these magmatic settings, these nickel deposits, you need some sort of a mechanism for these magmas to get in place. And so, with the work and the reinterpretation of some of the historic geophysics, we've developed this concept that there's a conduit, and within this conduit, and again, using a magmatic nickel model, typically these things don't occur by themselves. And so demonstrating a bit more scale. I mean, we're now seeing the favorable rock. Let's call it the container rock. We're seeing that 3-4 kilometers along strike to the northeast, and to the southwest, where the gabbro is probably still there, but it's now under cover, overlying metasediments. But we're seeing some incredible anomalies, soil anomalies, geochemical anomalies developing off to the west-southwest, which is a bit of a surprise. It was a very, very pleasant surprise, and certainly we'll be releasing those results in the near future. But I guess center of gravity. Again, we were talking off camera, and I've been on record talking about the Voisey's Bay deposit, and just very, very simply, at Voisey's Bay you have this long dike-like feature. Within this dike feature, you have disseminated sulfides, you have magmatic breccias, you have massive sulfide veins, and then there's the ovoid. There's this massive sulfide body, and I'm not saying that we've got the next Voisey's Bay, but it's a good geological model to sort of focus our drive on. And so we've got the disseminated sulfides, and we found more disseminated sulfides, 1.5 kilometers, 2 kilometers along strike. In and around the Gochager deposit, we've got these beautiful shoots of massive sulfide, or semi-massive sulfide breccias. This is where we're getting our 2 to 3% nickel and the very, very good cobalt grades. And then we're seeing these massive sulfide veins. So where is our ovoid? Where is our body of massive sulfide? Well, now we've got a much bigger area to look at for that, because of the work that we've done on surface and the soil geochemistry. And and as things progress here, if in an ideal world, this liniment that we uncovered last year, if it aligns perfectly with a gabbro metasediment contact, well, maybe that's an area where things have pooled up. So maybe that's a body of massive sulfide subsurface, right? So these are the things that, the work that we've done allows us to start thinking about these possibilities.
Mm-hmm. And I do want to follow up around the future of this now. I mean, in terms of dual targets or further above ground work, but maybe I'll just kind of sidestep and just ask you around, nickel macro. Do you want to just discuss, where are we at with nickel? It's still kind of glued to $7 a pound. And I want to bring you on for a more proper deep dive later to kind of discuss the tensions and kind of the forward-looking sort of issues there. But where are we at? Where do you find nickel right now? What are your thoughts on nickel? Is there a hope for it to get up off the mat? What is it going to take? What are the threats or the tensions here that that you're seeing, I guess, as someone who's in nickel every day?
Well, it's certainly, I think we've been following, we've been at a level, and we've been at that level for a long time. And it's, I think that's positive that it hasn't gone further south. So I like to think that there's one way for it to go, and that's up. But things haven't changed since we became public. It's just, everything was all the buzz because of EVs, but, things have changed there. But what hasn't changed is this demand for nickel going forward. And, it's interesting to our neighbor to the south there. He's woken the situation up. And, I was talking with a fellow the other day, and we were kind of, he went over to the Ukraine and he's looking at all the critical metals there. And then he was kind of knocking on Greenland's door, and it's like, hello, north of the 49th, we've got it all here for you. So I think there's going to be, I think there's a lot of investment coming in things like, the critical mineral space, and nickel will have its day. The demand for stainless steel is not going away. Subsidies have come off EV nickels in the U.S. and, realistically, that was a bit of a pipe dream, thinking that we're all going to be driving Teslas by 2030.
Yeah. Sells a slide deck pretty good, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and then of course you mentioned Indonesia, and that situation is not getting better. In fact, they're trying to control production so that they can, for their own benefit. And of course, they're starting to sort of clamp down on some of the mining operations. So I think it's going to have its day. It's going to have its day, and then there's facilities, refineries, smelters here in North America that are running at about 60 to 70% capacity, and they're going to need that feed soon. So,
and well, I guess I'll focus on the Indonesian and sort of the China factor there in terms of these kind of escalating geopolitical, international, global tensions. Are you seeing, again, you being sort of a spokesperson for nickel, and you've got your finger on the pulse on a daily basis there with your own sort of trap line of people that or whatever, right? But are you seeing, are you seeing actual serious, the demonstration of politicians taking it seriously in terms of actually treating nickel like a critical metal? I guess, we were just talking again about, we just watched every REE Junior Co. 4X in the last month because of Chinese restrictions, right? And I keep waiting for that to be a sort of wake-up call. And I guess this goes back to your point about Mr. Donald Trump, right? But there should be a wake-up call for the West to start trying to onshore these things. Are you seeing, are nickel players and thinkers believers that Canada is starting to pull up its socks in this regard, or is it still sort of skepticism or cynicism that it's not quite there yet? Or I guess, what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question, and you always have to be careful because rhetoric is one thing, and getting things done is another. But I like to think that it is starting, but there's still a long ways to go. I mean, if the U.S. they've sort of sped up permits for key projects. And I think Canada's taking note, and we need big projects in this country. And let's not just focus on federal money, whether it be American or U.S. dollars, but funds are starting to get interested, and the guys we've had dealings with in New York City are saying, "Hey, I'm getting calls about nickel." And people that have done very well in other places now have nice, healthy pockets, and they're looking for another place to go. And Doug and I have said all along that we can't pause. We've got to be at the front of the bus when it's go time, and not the back of the bus. And I think, backing up here a little bit, we continue to push the needle forward and get ourselves in position. So when this money starts becoming more available, we're there.
Still there. Well, and that's perfect segue, because the next question, and basically the end of the conversation, at the end of our interview, the rest of it will be just around what's next. And I agree, right? I mean, are you here to mine the resource, or just mine the market, right? If you actually are serious about trying to develop a mine and make a discovery, or vice versa, or whatever order you want to put that in, that you have to actually keep moving, right? If you just going into hibernation and collecting a paycheck, I guess it's a viable strategy for some, but if you're actually serious about it, then you need to keep moving, right? And so I guess my question for you then, I mean, again, I'll try to be brief, try to be economic, but that's not always my forte. But, I've always tell people when I talk about Fathom that, Gochager deserves 10,000 meters, right? That I just keep saying, it's this tantalizing thing for me that if you could just get 10,000 meters into there, drill it and kill it, or, make the major success, make the major discovery that I think is there, it deserves that. Fair or unfair, until the market decides otherwise, probably a 10,000 meter campaign is off the books for Gochager, right? And so I guess in the absence of that, let's say you raise a couple $1 million here again, what are your plans with that? Do you plan to do sort of a riskier, smaller drill campaign? Do you continue developing above ground targets? Is there a point where sort of diminishing returns on that front with above ground work, where you kind of have to get to the drill? I guess, where do you feel Fathom is and Gochager is in terms of what you would do with the funds as they come in here for 2026?
Yeah, a really good question. You live and die by the drill bit in this junior exploration. So we need to get to drilling. And yes, it deserves 10, it deserves 15. And I'd be comfortable with a 15,000 meter drill budget, because I think we've got, lots of targets, lots of things to test with the drill bit. We may have to, well, we will. We'll scale it back. So if we can put together some funds, to get out there and drill this coming winter, I'd like to do that. Yeah. How much that's going to be? I mean, like, what have we drilled thus far? We've drilled just over 5,000 meters since we've started there. If we can drill 3,000 to 5,000 meters in a campaign in winter of next year, and it's kind of important that we get at this, Matthew, because I worked very, very hard at getting a permit, which is going to allow us to go into Gochager overland. And Adam was up at there last week, and we've scouted out the last little bit of trail that we need off of Highway 102 to get us up to Benjamin Lake, and then from there we get on to Bellows Lake, and then from there we're into camp. So I need a real good cold Saskatchewan winter, and at the very least I'm going to get some equipment in there. And if we're going to go through all this effort, well, let's pull a drill in there. And that's complicated too, because you got to get somebody who's willing to take that gamble to get it in there. And well, we'll get it back out March, April. But ideally we'd like to leave it there so that we can continue. So that, these are some of the challenges, the logistical challenges, but it's very, very important that we have a program this coming winter. I talked about, we'll have news about, a new geology map. We'll have soil results, and we've continued to look at the 2008 VTEM data. And now that we've got, the expanded footprint that we can drop over top of the VTEM, how many more targets are there? And, maybe we got to do one more level of de-risking with some surface geophysics this winter. And of course, winter is optimal because ponds and swamps are frozen and off you go, right? So, we couldn't do that in the fall. I'd like to think that it's going to be an active winter, and we're going to do our damnedest to make sure it is. Yeah.
So I guess maybe I can't help but ask, do you have already, how many targets right now are kind of priority one, ready to go? Let's get after it.
Well, I mean, there's things that I'd like to follow up on at Gochager itself. There's targets west of Gochager that we didn't get to, and these are borehole EM targets that we haven't tested. Some of the geophysics that we have done has got at this really tantalizing target southwest of Gochager Lake itself. We've talked about these anomalies, these awful anomalies that are building as we get to the ends of these drill holes. What's out there? So there's targets like that, and then with some of this, the soil geochemistry that we did last summer with that beautiful 600 plus lineament of very, very upper percentile nickel values. Is that at this contact I was talking about earlier? Is that telling us that there's something subsurface? This anomaly appears to be over top of the metasediments and not over top of the gabbro. I haven't quite figured that one out yet, but maybe, the important thing, maybe it's just a collection of anomalous nickel in soils over top of a contact. So that's a target, and then maybe we'll see something in the VTEM associated with that and say, okay, well, yeah, there's a conductor there, and get at it. And then these things further along strike, where we've encountered disseminated sulfides in gabbro with our success with borehole EM, drill a hole and see if there's something off hole, and boom, you've got another target. So there's no shortage of things that we can do with the drill bit, and do, I think, with a fair bit of confidence.
Yeah, no, it continues. It remains, and we were saying, a top-tier solid nickel discovery remains a story that captures the market's eye, despite nickel being in the doldrums here. We're talking about talent metals, right?
We can get in the intersection like that where
rip your face off, right?
Yeah. No, that's what we need. That's what we need. Yeah.
Well, no, I guess, as far as I can tell, I've brought this to the end of my questions. Anything that you wanted to touch on or discuss before we depart?
No. I just think, it's a tough business. I've said that before. And then, you get the summer wildfires thrown at you. And, it was quite amazing to think, when S and I were out there, we wanted to get over to Gochager Lake because they had left a boat there and we wanted to make sure it was still there. and it was, but the lanyard they used to tie it to the tree, that had burnt. But the boat was full of water, and there was still a bunch of stuff in there, and I just can't help but think of the fear and the horror of our crews that were out there saying, "Holy jeez, smoke and flames, and man, we got to get out of here." And we did. We got everybody out very, very safely, and kudos to all involved. And then we were talking about this off camera. It's just the guys that stayed in there to keep the pumps going so that we'd keep our sprinkler system going over top of camp. And we saved camp, our brand new camp. It's a beautiful camp. We've saved camp. And it's been quite a summer.
You don't need anything more interesting in your life.
No, it's been quite a summer, but the geology, the geochemical part of things, it's all good. I mean, it's a good story. It's a good story, and it's going to continue to be a good story. And I think we're coming into a favorable market here again, and we're ready to go
on the upswing. I absolutely believe it. Yeah. So, that's my ending thoughts here. If you are in the market for a downtrodden metal that hasn't quite kind of hit the up ramp the way that gold has, and you're looking for somewhere to reallocate and you're willing to be a bit of a contrarian and lead the charge, I think that nickel absolutely is worthy of your time. And by extension, I mean, I still think Fathom Nickel still has one of the strongest exploration nickel stories I've come across.
Well, and of course, we have to, maybe we haven't done a very good job of educating people, but with the nickel, we've got this amazing cobalt at Gochager, and then of course there's copper.
And cobalt's happening every
and cobalt's being stockpiled, south of the border, and then of course our Albert Lake thing, platinum and palladium has come back in vogue. And I had a phone call this morning with a gentleman in California, and just, wish we could probably make this go again, So we're critical minerals, and in that is platinum, palladium, gold, silver. There's a bit of silver at Rottenstone. The nickel, the copper, the cobalt. So we've got a good basket there. And I mean, nickel's going to have its day, but along with the nickel comes all these other good things too. So
excellent. Well, no, thank you, Ian. And
thank you very much, man.